Hello guys, welcome back to this Jbehave crash course for beginners. My name is Emiliano, and for today's session I would like to show you and to teach you how to test web services with Jbehave. To use this framework to test web services, we're going to help ourselves with a known library called REST Assured. Despite it can be a little bit overwhelming at the beginning, because sometimes we will have to write our own JSON files, for example. To be honest, it's really simple, it's really easy to use, and it's pretty straightforward. So, before starting coding, let's take a quick glance at what a REST service is. Honestly, I'm not gonna deep dive much into it because that, let's say, exceeds the scope of this tutorial. My main idea is to show you how to write tests. So let's take a quick view at what a web service is, or what a REST service is. Basically, REST stands for Representational State Transfer. It's a way, more or less, that a web page has to communicate through HTTP protocol with another service, another server that is located who knows where. It's located in the cloud, let's say. What do we do? For example, we send a request that can be in JSON or in an XML asking something. A quick example, it can be, let's perform a get. We tell this service, please get me the temperature in London right now. So basically what we are doing is we're writing a URL that tells get me the temperature in the coordinates whatever in JSON. So the service is gonna read our request. It's gonna evaluate if it's well formed, if we didn't miss anything, if we didn't, I don't know, write a non-existent position or something like that, and it's going to give us back a status code. For example, 200, that means OK, and a body that can be a JSON or an XML, as I said before, saying, OK, the temperature for London is 200 or whatever, I'm saying a bogus number, or 30 degrees Fahrenheit, or I don't know, -1 degrees Celsius. We can also perform different action. This is a get, but we can also perform a post. A simple example is when we create an account, let's say on Facebook. Despite we open a browser and we sign up, we add our username, our email, and our password. Behind the scenes, what we are actually doing is we're sending a request in a JSON format usually and the body of this JSON is our username, our email, and our password, and we're sending this to the server. The server again evaluates this and is saying, okay, this username is valid, he didn't try to use, I don't know, invalid email or an invalid password. And if everything is fine, he's going to tell us, okay, I created your account. Each and every response has a status code. For example, in this case, when we create something, the status code for created is 201. 200 means okay. 404 is the most known one, is that it doesn't exist. For example, when we try to call a URL that, I don't know, we mistype something or something like that, is a 404. Besides the get and the post also, we can perform some updates. That's also a method update. We can also perform an update through this put method, but it's tricky because we can also create an entry with this method. We can also perform a delete. This is pretty much the introduction that I wanted to make before starting writing test cases. In the upcoming moments, we're going to start writing a Jbehave test, a pretty simple one. We're going to start with the get. We're going to perform a get to a service. and then we're gonna take a look at the status code. We're gonna assert it to see if it's a valid one, if it's the one that we were expecting, and we're gonna take a look at the response. We're gonna sniff around the body, and we're gonna see if the response that the server gave us matches with the thing that we were expecting. Okay, with no further ado, let's start coding. Here we are. As I said before, now is the time to start coding and start writing test cases. As you can see on the screen, here I already opened Eclipse and I created a little project which is still empty, but I have my story file, my steps file, and the mapper class. This is the class, as you all know, that calls the story file and matches it with the steps. If you don't know how to set this up, I have a couple of videos that explain how to do this. It's on this same channel, so just take a look at it, and I try to explain every step following easy steps. So just follow that, and if you have any doubt, please don't doubt to comment or something like that, and I will assist you. I'm glad to give you a hand. So what you see here on screen is the POM file, because this is a Maven project. The POM file of this project. Here we have all the libraries that you already know, like Java, Maven, JUnit, also Jbehave, Selenium, and the only thing that I have added to this project is this little thing here, Rest Assured. This is the library that I told you before, that is the one that is going to help us to reach the services. So basically, I had to add this dependency, which its group ID is JWay Rest Assured, the artifact is Rest Assured, and the latest version for now is 2.9.0. So we are already, we can start directly writing test cases that are gonna call the REST services. Before that, I wanted to show you, this is Postman. This is basically started as an add-on of Chrome, where you can basically perform requests and you will get the responses. This is a tool that's going to help us do that. And the cool thing about Postman is that it has embedded a couple of examples, like this one, for instance. This URL, postman-echo.com/delay, we can perform a get to this URL /3, for example, and if we perform a get request, boom, send, we're going to receive a response. This response is going to have a body. It's more or less basically a dummy server, but this is perfect for us to test it. And the body has delay with the value 3. And here at the right hand side of the tool, we see the status code. As I told you before, 200 stands for OK. So we directly can start coding now. Okay, here we are back on our Eclipse IDE, and we have in front of us our Jbehave demo project. Okay, as I told you before, the only thing that we added to the POM file is just this Rest Assured library. So if you created the Jbehave project following the previous tutorial, feel free just to add this. You can Google Maven Rest Assured dependency, and you will have, as I showed you before, this dependency you have just to copy paste it onto the POM file. Currently the latest version is 2.9.0, but maybe if you're looking at this video in the future, hopefully there's gonna be a newer version. So let's move quickly to the story file. The story file, as you can see, is empty, but here, as you know from the previous videos, here is basically the real test file. Here's where we write our steps in, let's say, human readable language. So the first thing that we know that we have to do, we have to make a call to the server. So, and it's going to be a get, we said before, given I perform a get request to the Postman server. We know that this is going to be, let's say, our kickoff point. This is going to be the first thing that this test has to do. So we're going to send the GET request, and then we're going to play around with the response. We're going to check what about the status code, if it's the one that we're expecting, if it's a good status code, or if the body of the response has a particular, I don't know, field that we need and stuff like that. So let's copy this action phrase and let's transform it into actual Java code. Here, as you can see, the class is completely empty, but we said before that this is going to be a given and that the action phrase is this one. Let me remind you just in case, but the Jbehave is really strict on the matching of the story files with the steps class, actually, regarding the action phrases. So they have to be an exact copycat. If you have an extra space here or in the story file, or you wrote some word with camel case, for example, Jbehave won't be able to recognize it because it won't be able to match it, and that is going to fail. So please be sure and pay attention to it. Just basically copy paste in the sentence and you will be fine. So as I said before, let's define the actual method, which is going to be public because it's going to be called through this through the mapper class. It's going to be void because actually it's not returning anything. And let's name it, I don't know, get request to server. We don't need any parameters for this one. So let's import the given. Alright, let's save it. We are missing one bracket here, the bracket of the class. Oh, okay, now it looks a little bit nicer. So the first thing we have to think is, okay, we're gonna send a request, but the important thing in this particular case is not actually the request that we're sending, because it's important, of course, but it's also more important for us the response that we're gonna get, because we need to take this and evaluate to see if the server responded well, if is everything okay with the request, if the body of the response has everything. Because for instance, if we send a wrong request, the server is going to tell us, no man, you messed up, so are you pointing to a wrong service, or the URL is malformed. So that's what we need. We actually need the response. Let's name it resp, for example. And okay, it's underlined red because we haven't imported. So here it is, import response from rest assured response. That's exactly what we need. So we already have whatever we send and whatever we receive is going to be encapsulated on this variable, on resp. So what do we have to do? We know that the name of the library is rest assured, so we can directly call this library rest assured. And we said that, okay, what do we want to do? We want to make a get. And that's it. It's as simple as that. Of course, between the parentheses, what we need is this URL. It's going to be this one that was postman-echo. Here, postman-echo.com delay 3. So that's it. Directly, we already wrote a step that sends a GET request to a particular URL. To make it a little prettier and more useful, actually, because now we just have the response and we're not doing anything with it, what we can do is to sniff in the console the complete response. So let's call this variable that is declared here. Oh, I made a mistake. Done. Let's call this variable resp, and rest assured has a bunch of methods that we can use, but there is a cool one. This print that basically prints the response as a string. We also, if we want, we can check the status code. I think it's get status code. And in theory we said that the status code okay is 200, so if everything is fine, we should see in the console the body of the JSON that it should be exactly like this one. It should have a parameter field called delay with a value named 3. And if we also did it fine, we should also see as status code 200. What we have to do is basically we have to run this test. Let's call it's this class. Let's run as JUnit test. And it's not a Selenium test, so we won't have any browser or nothing like it. We will just have to trust and believe on our IDE. If you take a look here, delay 3. It's perfect. We don't see the status code because we just got it and we didn't print it. But we know that it responded well because the body of the response matches with the one that we saw on Postman. But just to be a little constant with this, let's print it. Let's print it. Okay, let's save it and let's run it once again. Let's be patient. And here you see that the body again is delay 3 as we wanted to be, and the status code is 200. The next steps, of course, we're gonna assert that this is the actual status code, and we're gonna sniff around the body of the response just to assert that everything is fine. So now we already have the first step, the kickoff point, the point where we send the request and we get something in return. Now is the funniest part, or the most interesting part. It's the moment that we start manipulating the response. So perhaps the first thing that we should do before checking the body is to see if the status code that the server gave us back is the one that we were expecting. So let's go back to the story file and let's write a when, because this is going to be, let's say, the inflection point of the test. And let's see when I verify that the status code is, in this case, we're expecting 200. So let's save this. Again, let's copy this action phrase, this sentence, and let's make it a little bit more generic. Instead of expecting always 200, let's transform that 200 into a variable. This is really useful because we are going to be able to reuse this step, like in many test cases, without expecting always 200. We can change that value in the story files for a 404, a 201, a 500, a number, any number, and we will always be able to verify if the status code is the one that we're expecting. So we say that it's a when, and we said that this 200 is not going to be hard coded, but it's going to be a variable. So let's call it code. Again, let's make this method public because we're calling it from some other class, void because it doesn't return a thing, and checking status code. The status code, we know that is a number, an integer number, so let's compare it to an integer. So code is going to be an integer. Let's create the method, let's perform all the imports. Perfect, now looks pretty. This status code, where does it come? It comes in the response. What we have to modify now is that the variable where we have the response is a local variable strictly used in the previous method, in this getRequestToServer method. So we can't access through here, because if I call res here, it's going to fail because this, in theory, this variable doesn't exist. So what resp is resp. It still doesn't exist. So what do we have to do? this resp it should be accessible for all the methods. So what we should do is make this variable global, a global variable that is going to belong to the whole class. Let's delete this. So we have to declare it here. Now when we perform this call, the get request is going to be stored outside the method, so we're going to be able to reuse it from everywhere. Okay, now we have the body and the status code. We have the whole response here. What we have to do, we have to see if it matches with this number that we're expecting. So let's delete this and let's directly call assert. We have to assert equally JUnit assert equals, we said, what is it? Assert equals. Oh, we can do this one direct. Okay, expected. Which is the one that we're expecting? Code. So let's put code here. And here we're gonna compare it to the status code that is in the response. So let's call the response get status code. And in theory, this step for the whole test actually is gonna perform the request. It's gonna print the response here. It's also gonna print the status code because here we're not gonna print it. And then it's gonna check if this status code that the server is giving us back is the actual one that we're expecting. So just to dissipate all kind of doubts, let's trigger this. Let's run this test. Okay, now we see that it's loading. It needs performing the request. Perfect. We see all the things that are printed and the test passed. Clearly the status code was 200. It's the same one that we were expecting. Just to see if it's not hard coded or nothing like it, let's put here 400, 404 to make it more known. Let's try it again, and of course it should fail because it's gonna say that it retrieved 200 instead of 404. Like, perfect. That means the test is well written. Failed. Expected 404 but was 200. So this is a simple and basic test on how to basically perform get calls to a server and how to check the status code. We also can perform, we can validate the body of the response, and that's what we're gonna do in the then step. Okay, so we already wrote the step that's gonna perform the get request. We also verified that the status code was the one that we were expecting, that it was 200, and now is the time, the perfect moment to check if the response has what we're expecting. As we check on postman, we know that if we call the /delay/3 URL, the response has a field that is called delay and has a value of 3. So let me clean the console. So what we have to do now is just write another action phrase. For example, I check that the body of the response has the value 3. Let's copy this and let's do the magic and let's transform it into Java code. So we know that it's a then, and we know that this is the sentence. So, but let's make it a little bit more generic, so maybe we can use this step many times. Let's call it I, because it's going to be an integer, because 3 is an integer. So it's a public, I explain why, and it's also a void. And let's call this method whatever, checking the response. Let's go. it has a parameter that is this I. Oops, here it is. That is an integer because we know that 3 is an integer. Let's import it then. So, what do we have to do first? We have after this method, this step, we store the response. The response, it's a different type, so it's not so easy to sniff around, sniff inside actually, sniff inside it. So we have to transform it into a string that is a more readable form. So let's create a string. Let's call it JSON, and this JSON, as I said, is going to be the actual response, but as a string. Perfect. Okay. Now we have the response in a more readable format. What do we have to do now? We have to tell rest assured, this library that is helping us, please check inside this string if this value is present. So rest assured has a method, let's say, that is called JSON path. This JSON path. So we have to invoke this JSON path. Let's call it JSON path JP. We're instantiating it, JSON path. And this is basically, let's call it the tool that rest assured has to check inside the strings. So we created a new JSON path, and inside we're going to tell him, okay, the JSON path, please check inside the string that we just created. The name is JSON. So let's import this. Import, as you can see, is from rest assured. So far, so good. We have the response, we store it globally. Now we transform it into a string and we send it to JSON path for it to check it out for us. Now what's the part that we have to do? It's basically the same thing that we did before. We have to assert, we have to verify, we have to check if inside this response is the value that we are expecting. So let's assert equally, because we have to compare values. Let's put this double, it doesn't matter. Okay, expected. The expected is the value that we have to compare to. So that we are expecting actually. So how can we do it? What we have to do is we have to call JSON path to give us a hint. So JSON path. Can you tell us the integer that is inside JSON path, inside the body? Okay, but in strictly which part of the response? We know that postman says that the field delay has the value 3. So we have to tell JSON path, please check if there's an integer inside the field delay, and just compare it to the value of I. If everything is fine, that's it. If everything is fine, JSON path is going to tell us, yes, inside delay there is a 3 that matches the value that you wrote. So let's run this and let's see what happens. Let me maximize the console. Now it's waiting, it's performing the request, and expected 5 but was 3. Why? Because I was trying before and I changed the URL, which means that actually the step is working because I was pointing to a different URL. Let's check again to the value 3, delay /3. Let's try one more time. It's performing the request, and the value is 3. These tryings that I was doing before, I changed the URL just to check how robust and how stable the test was. Again, we can do the same thing one more time, but let's put a different number. Let's put the number 9, because if you go to Postman and you modify the URL here, you put number 9 and you perform the GET request, the response is going to have a under value, inside delay, sorry, is going to have the number 9. If we put number 50, it's going to have only number 10. It just goes up to number 10. We put number 12. The response is going to have an inside delay is going to have the number 10. Let's check. Let's wait for a second. Number 10, perfect. So now, if we call number 9 and we're expecting number 3, as it happened the first time, this test should fail, and it shall actually. Let's perform the request, and now exactly perfect. Expected 9, but it was 3. Actually, it should be the other way around. That is also a nice thing, because that made us realize that we put in the wrong order. Let's check one more time. Now we should expect 3. It should alter the order. You should expect 3, but it will be 9. Perfect. Expected 3, but it was 9. So basically, with this thing, we can verify. Needless to say that if I put 9 here, of course, this test will pass. Okay, but while it's running, I can start making the closure of the video. What I would like to point out is that with these 3 simple steps, we already managed to verify that, see, the test passed perfectly, that we can communicate to a server, we can send a well-performed request, a well-made request, and we can check the status code and also the body of a JSON. So with just 3 simple lines, we managed to create a really robust and stable test case. As you saw before, these 2 steps are really generic, so we can reuse this step in some other test case that has to check if the response is 404, or we want to check some error, so we're expecting a 500. The same as this one, if we want to, we hard coded the value delay, the field delay actually. But for instance, if we want to write several test cases for this same server, but with different number, let's say /3, /4, we can reuse this step in many different test cases. So with just a few lines, let's check how many lines we used here. We created a really robust and stable test case that it can be stable, maintainable, and completely scalable. I hope you like this video. On the upcoming sessions, we're gonna try to check how to perform a little bit more complex requests. For example, a post where we have to write our JSON file. We have to transform this JSON into a string, and then we have to send it. And then we can deal with more complex responses. My name is Emiliano, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't hesitate in leaving your comment or subscribe, and feel free to contact me if you have any doubt. Thank you, and see you soon.